All right, Jim, so let's talk about what happened with the Twins yesterday as they really got it going offensively, scored a bunch of runs against the knuckleballer Matt Waldron. 11-4 the final score. Your thoughts on yesterday's win?
7 hits in 12 pitches. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. I'm kind of flabbergasted. You just don't see that. Remarkable run. He was trying to get ahead, and they were just hacking at it. And Waldner had a big home run, but they all hit pretty well. Just kind of a nice, relaxing day at the ballpark at the end of a very difficult road trip. They had lost 3 in a row. They ended up winning the road trip 4-3. They ended up salvaging a game in San Diego against the hottest team in baseball. Of course, Tuesday night is the one that stings. That one really hurt. At least they got Okert back out there again yesterday. He looked better, clear his head going into, every game in every series is big right now. But they're back within 2.5 of Cleveland. And it's just, the great thing about this kind of race is also what's torturous about this kind of race is every game feels so important. We'll look back at the end of the season and they'll say, okay, maybe that game wasn't that important. Maybe Okert blowing that game on Tuesday night didn't matter. But in the moment, everything feels so important. They might get Buxton back as early as Friday, probably sometime this weekend. He doesn't have a setback. Correa is still trying to find a way to run without pain. I don't know how to predict how long he'll be out. Royce Lewis kind of broke out of a bit of a slump the last couple of days. Maybe he'll get it going. He also swings the bat a lot better at home. And they're playing against, a pretty good Cardinals team. And, I think Saturday night, Sonny Gray will face Pablo Lopez. That would be pretty interesting.
Certainly things are seemingly, it's amazing how things can, go from things not looking great to looking a lot better. And I think you've kind of, many times when we've talked about the baseball season, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And each game shouldn't overwhelm you with the result, positive or negative. But you look at these standings. This could be a real interesting race. We're into, mid-August, getting close to late August. We've got September here, and it's 3 teams fighting it out to win the division. And then there's wild card spots, which the Twins and Royals are sitting in right now. But the Red Sox are 3.5 games back, so that's not a guarantee either. Right.
It's exactly what baseball wanted. They wanted all this intrigue. They wanted meaningful games. And now, really, every game the Twins have played in the last 2 years has been very meaningful. And most seasons this regime's been in place, they played meaningful games. I know it drives people crazy when you see this team lose a big game. And when you lose, guess what? Somebody will be responsible for that loss and will elicit a certain amount of anger. But it's just the nature of the game, The other teams lose too. They're having a really good season. And Cleveland, and they've tracked down Cleveland, which was playing like the best team in baseball for a long time. And they're going up against a very good young Royals team. And between injuries and pitching breakdowns and uncertain middle relief, which everybody has. Anything can happen from this point. The Twins could win the division going away. The Twins could miss the playoffs. Probably the safest bet is they hang in there and get a wild card spot, but anything can happen at this point. That's what I love about it. I love the fact that you go from it being a marathon to being a series of sprints is the way I look at it. These games, they're not more important than the games early in the season, but there are just fewer of them, so they're more precious. And weekend series with the Cardinals, and David Festa and Zebby Matthews are 2 of your starters in a very important series. Another of those things you can't predict in baseball.
Jim, how do you feel like when you look at this Twins team and how they've played in the playoffs in the past, is it just getting hot at the right time? Is there certain personnel that does better in the playoffs? What are your thoughts on playoff potential success?
I think it's a combination of many things. Number one, first time when they returned to the playoffs, 2002, they went to the ALCS. They lost to eventual champion Angels with a very young team, very inexperienced team. And then they started playing the Yankees, and they did not match up well against the Yankees. They didn't get calls in Yankee Stadium. They didn't have power arms that could blow those guys away so those guys could take pitches that are borderline and get the call. They're facing veteran pitchers who knew how to pitch to young hitters. very rarely were healthy. They didn't have Liriano in 06. They didn't have Maurer and Morneau playing together in the playoffs. Somebody was always hurt. It was just a combination of all those things. And obviously, once the Yankees started beating them, there was an intimidation factor that also played out. So I think the bad matchup and bad vibes of playing the Yankees was the main reason they had a long playoff drought. And then last year they did break through, and they lost to a good Astros team that they probably, if they'd played better, if Sonny Gray had pitched better, they would have had a chance to win. So I think most of the bad vibes about the playoffs were related to the Yankees. I think them winning last year kind of breaks that.
We don't see a lot of knuckleballers in baseball anymore. Matt Waldron is a guy who had a real good run earlier. Is there a point where teams get enough tape on a guy and then they can figure him out, or is it just sometimes the knuckleball just isn't moving?
Yeah, I just think they had a good approach, and he's not a pure knuckleballer like we've seen the old days, where every pitch is knuckleball and anything can happen, and it's really frustrating for a hitter to face. He throws other pitches too, and they just seem to have a good plan for when to take. And I think really, you look at 7 hits and 12 pitches. Well, how do you do that? Well, you go up there looking for a certain pitch in a certain spot, and you get it before he can get you behind and throw you some kind of weird knuckleball that's going to be really hard to hit. So I just thought it was a really good approach by the Twins.
Jim, the Minnesota Lynx last night, they win 98-87 at Las Vegas. Big victory for them. Nafisi Collier, 23 points. Courtney Williams had 22 and 10 assists. Thoughts on that win for the Lynx?
Probably as good a game as we've seen from the Lynx in many years. They're playing against the defending champs in Vegas. Vegas knows they have to win the game. 4 of the starters are Olympians. And the Lynx just beat them, just outplayed them. Played beautifully on offense, played excellent defense. Collier really did a great job on Asia Wilson. They played great team defense. Courtney Williams hit tons of big shots. Nafisa Collier was excellent as usual. And Hines Allen came right in. She looked fantastic. They got her mainly for rebounding, but they knew she was a good passer. But her ability to pass the ball and back cut and take advantage of when the Aces tried to overplay either Collier or Williams or McBride, she played beautifully. What a great pickup. Now the Lynx are third place, half a game out of second place, 2.5 ahead of Vegas, 2 ahead of Seattle, with a big weekend coming. Vegas here Friday, then Lynx at home against Caitlin Clark on Saturday while retiring Maya Moore's jersey. This is getting really intriguing.
Are they good enough to win the championship this year?
I would have said no, and it looks like this year the Liberty are the best team in the league, and we can see that coming. I mean, they put together kind of an all-star team, but I think last night tells us we don't have to rule out the Lynx being a factor.
Jim, the Vikings are getting set for their final preseason game on Saturday. Is this a game where we're going to see even less starters than we have seen, and it's going to be a game where guys that are second and third string are battling for spots?
I think this is a special teams practice dressed up as a game, basically. I think they're going to get a look at younger players. They're trying to make decisions on the last spots on the roster. They're trying to figure out who should be on the roster because of their special teams ability. They made some roster moves this last week, bringing in young players for a look. Those guys might get a look. It's really not going to be much of a game.
Do you think the NFL might look at preseason? Do they analyze this each year and determine, should we have preseason games? Is it just a money grab because they want to, have it's either 1 or 2 preseason games that each one of these teams is playing? Home games as far as that goes?
It's a money grab. Coaches used to really like preseason games as an evaluating tool. So there used to be a marriage between the business people who wanted to get the free money you get for preseason games and football people who wanted a lot of evaluation time on the field. And we just know that it's really not that good an evaluator anymore. So I really think the NFL has been just segueing toward an 18-game regular season and 2 preseason games. And then you have 1 preseason game where you probably play your starters as much as you want to play in a game. You have a joint practice. Then you have a preseason game where you probably don't play your starters or play them much, and you evaluate the rest of your roster, and then you make a lot of money on that 18th regular season game. Of course, the difficult part of that is it increased risk of injury from players playing another full violence game. But I think that's where we're headed.
Is there less pushback from players to play 18 games in regular season?
Players would negotiate for two things. There's already been talk of, if you're going to go to 18 games, maybe every player has a designated game off in the middle of the season. So each player is only playing 17. The team's playing 18. The other factor is, you're going to play 18 games, then pay us more. Pay us more because you're making more. Pay us more also because we're risking our limbs in another game.
Jim, Alabama, I believe, is the first college football team to hire a general manager to deal with the NIL money and the contracts. Do you expect other college programs to follow suit?
It only makes sense. We've already heard Mark Coyle talking about how, and listen, whatever you think of whatever athletic director does at the U, there's no question it's a really hard job. You're juggling knives, you're juggling cats, you're trying to be fair to everything from the biggest revenue sport to the smallest non-revenue or lower revenue sport. And you're constantly trying to raise money. It used to be donor money. Now it's NIL and donor money. And it kind of makes sense to have somebody who's good. It's like having Rob Brzezinski with the Vikings. I mean, it's such a relief for the general managers. They have a true salary cap expert in the building, so they can concentrate on the other parts of their very difficult jobs. The general manager just makes a lot of sense.
Are the Gophers in better position NIL money this year than they were, say, last year?
I guess. I mean, honestly, I haven't looked that closely at it. Maybe I will now that college football season's rolling around. I don't have a great feel for it. I know that I hear complaints all the time from Gopher fans and Gopher people. Hey, we just can't make the money that other teams did, other universities do. But I don't know that really changes. I mean, that's always been the case. They've always had less income than their rivals. So it's just a different, more obvious way of having less income than their rivals.
Why is that? Is there just less support? Is it because we're in a metro area as opposed to a smaller town? What do you think?
It's a combination of not having, listen, if you live in Michigan and you have money, you're probably going to want to be involved in Michigan football. It's the biggest thing in the state. And has a chance to win a national championship or a Big Ten championship every year. Gophers, they're competing with dollars with all the other major sports. I mean, Minnesota has everything. Minnesota has everything. So they're competing with all these other sports, and they don't have the cachet of being a team that you want to be aligned with in case they win the national championship. They're just kind of hoping to survive. They're hoping to have a good season every once in a while. So it's just a completely different vibe.
All right, Jim, what do you got in your podcast?
Let's see. We have the Viking Update show is coming out this morning. John Krasinski's show on Anthony Edwards, Naz Reid, and Karl Anthony Towns will be out later today. Preps Today with John Millay is out, and we'll have Chin Music coming up with Roy and Lavelle on Friday afternoon. And Jeff Diamond's NFL Insider will be out in the next 24 hours or so. Everything's at talknorth.com or on your favorite podcast app. All
right, Jim, thank you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Jim.
It's Jim Souhan, Star Tribune sports columnist, joining us each weekday morning at this time. Follow him on Twitter at SouhanStrib. Check out his latest column in the Star Tribune or his podcasts at talknorth.com. Jim, today is brought to you by the Green Mill in downtown St. Cloud. Dream Getaway 80. First code word of the day is MIX, M-I-X. Type that in. You can win a vacation of a lifetime. First code word of the day is MIX, M-I-X. News